Welcome to the Echo Essentials podcast. My name is Chris Pekarski. On today's episode, we have in our friend of the show, local political science contributor and political science professor at Nipissing University, your favorite, Dr. David Tabachnick, in to talk a bit about some global political issues, especially in relation to Canada, regarding Mark Carney, Doug Ford, good old DJT, and all things in relation to what's happening in our current, political climate in Canada and what is affecting Canada from outside. So it was great. We talked a bit about Mark Carney's speech at Davos, which kind of went semi-viral. We alluded to it in previous shows. We talked a bit about the states and regarding their views on Greenland, which was he put it really well in terms of how Trump likes to kind of contradict himself, obviously. But we talk about all kinds of things. We filter all the way down from, the global and Canada perspective. We talk about Pierre Poilievre being reapproved from the Federal Conservative Party, as well as a couple of other items along the way. So if you get a chance, get the full listen. We also get, this is a little after the fact at this point as we record this and air it in February, but we get Professor Tabachnick's thoughts and views on a very popular and I guess kind of important Netflix show. So give it the full listen. Make sure you stick around. If you get a chance, like us, drop us a comment. But before we get to all that stuff, though, we want to thank and throw it to our title sponsor of today's show, Source for Sports.
It's almost that time of year. Early mornings at the rink, fresh notebooks and backpacks, and a community gearing up for another great season of varsity sports. At Source for Sports North Bay, we're proud to be part of it all. Whether it's finding your kid's first pair of skates, gearing up for tryouts, or outfitting your team for the season ahead, we've got you covered. Because here, we're not just a sports store, we're neighbors, coaches, teammates, and fans. And we're proud to cheer you on every shift, step, and stride of the way. Visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street and let us help you along your way.
On today's episode, we're talking Canada, we're talking a little geopolitical, but we're talking all kinds of big things happening and how that might affect North Bay. But I'm not doing it alone. Today, I have our local friend, political science professor, and I guess kind of like our now new resident contributor in terms of politics, Dr. David Tabachnick. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Was sick for about 3 weeks, so hopefully I won't start coughing in the middle of the interview, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be out of the house.
Fair enough. Well, this is why there's a magic of post-production, right? It's that you can cough 1,000 times, and with Ben's skills, no one's ever going to know. he totally hates I brought that up. But let's bring some attention to the topics at hand. So last time we had you on, we kind of had an idea of things happening. We always have like this ever-lingering feeling of anxiety with how things are in the year 2025 and not 2026. But obviously, Canada has been on the global stage in a couple of different capacities and our own stage. And I'll bring forth the thing that happened probably the most predominantly was Mark Carney at Davos in relation to all the stuff happening with Trump and America. So maybe can you give some context as to what this conference was, where it was located, and the importance of that speech?
Yeah, this is a meeting of, I guess, elite politicians, economists, intellectuals, billionaires, tech bros. This is the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And, these are the circles, I guess, Carney is used to traveling in. So he gave quite a consequential speech that got quite a bit of attention. And, it's hard to say how history will treat it because you need some context, but people are saying it's really a groundbreaking speech that we'll remember for many years.
As a PR person, I gave him top marks for his speech writing skills. From what I can tell from the reporting that he wrote, if not all of it, most of it.
Yeah, I heard that.
Which is tremendous because I thought it was very eloquent and very poignant, but without ever actually saying names. It almost felt very kind of, not tongue-in-cheek per se, but like kind of indirectly direct, right? Which I think as the context of his speech, and maybe you could disagree, was kind of about like Canada's independence and pushing back on the old world order, I guess.
Well, right. Okay. So, look, I teach international relations in my courses, and so the way we kind of look at things is that after World War II, basically the liberal international order was set up. I think Carney sort of referenced this as the rules-based order.
Yes.
And that meant, things like the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Bretton Woods monetary system as well. All of these things sort of were set up to regulate the global economy, trade, and then, of course, diplomacy, with the idea that we would not end up with World War III. Soon after that, of course, the Cold War began.
Right.
And many of those institutions, the UN and the Security Council, really weren't functioning as they were supposed to. But with the end of the Cold War in the late 80s, early 90s, the idea was this was truly then the opportunity for those institutions to function as they were supposed to. And we did see for a short while this sort of blossoming of this rules-based order or the liberal international order. The United Nations was functioning properly. The Security Council was working. Obviously, the Soviet Union was no longer. Russia and the United States were getting along. So it was pretty significant, and there was lots of optimism. But then things changed again, as they do in global politics. We had, of course, the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. And that changed everything once again. And so those institutions once again were put on sort of the back burner. With the election of Donald Trump, that sort of pause in the rules-based order continued on. And let me put it this way, his impetuous leadership really rattled, of course, anybody who expected things to work as they were set up to work. And I think that's what Carney was ultimately talking about, that really, this rules-based order has never actually functioned as it was supposed to.
Right.
And now he's saying it's ruptured, which is pretty significant. So I think normally we would sort of say, okay, Trump's only in office for 36 more months, unless he runs a third time.
Oh, please.
Okay, yes, we can talk about that maybe.
I hope we don't.
And so, but Carney was basically saying, no, it's more significant than that. The United States, which of course was the leader of that order, setting up the United Nations, all of these economic institutions I've mentioned, basically have abdicated their responsibility. Instead of being the leader of the free world, as Americans are fond of calling themselves.
Quick to say.
Yes, that's right. Now they are about America first, isolationist in a kind of a strange way, and so I think Carney is just saying you're not a reliable partner anymore. And so we have to work together to basically succeed without the United States. And I think that's what the speech really was about.
Yeah, I think, and maybe you can clarify on this, but it feels like at a time where no one wants to mention the W word, like the war word. I mean, obviously Trump's most recent, gem of his eye, he wants Greenland, right? Which is made complicated because they're a territory of Denmark, which is part of NATO, what that looks like for international American force bases and trade. Because that speech was kind of meant to acknowledge that we don't ever want to try to throw the first punch, but we want to be able to maybe control or at least limit how our money moves a little bit.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things there. I mean, as far as the Greenland thing, frankly, for all of the things Trump has done over even his first term and into his second term, when he started talking about the use of force to take Greenland, which indeed he said rather explicitly, I became quite worried, actually. I thought, well, this is going to end up being very serious and troubling because, in essence, it would be the United States attacking an ally, Denmark, and a member of NATO, this very important military alliance, part of this rules-based order we were just talking about, this military alliance, NATO, which, of course, Canada is a founding member of as well. And that would just splinter then, defense for Europe. And in a weird way, really benefit a country like Russia because, of course, Russia has been kept at bay by the strength of NATO. And if NATO was weakened, it would embolden Russia. And so it was very concerning. So not just concerning about the fact that this territory would have been taken illegally by all international standards of law, it would be the larger consequences for NATO and then, of course, Europe, which needs to defend itself from a very aggressive Russia right now. So I think was very concerning, but it seems as though much of that has been walked back.
For now, it seems like.
For now.
And I don't want to ever appear like a pessimist because I try to be the eternal optimist. But he does seem to change his mind on things, and often, kind of like go against his former opinion. Like he'll often say, like, "Oh, I never said that. I never employed this person. I never signed this deal," and all those things historically proven has been like, "Well, you did actually," which is interesting because it feels like something Mark Carney mentioned, and we're going to rope in Russia and China as well, is that it feels kind of like. Would you use the word rupture, which I think was interesting. I think it's being kind of coined.
Carney used the word.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No. You. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But he kind of almost tried to signal for the middle powers to kind of come forth and start playing more in the game instead of sitting on the sidelines, which it seems like the speech was trying to embody, I guess.
Yeah.
Because all these different things at play. I know we're throwing a lot of dice on the board here. But I mean, NATO helps to exist in the sense of like it kind of, becomes a barrier for Russia. We talk about international trade and who might benefit from people splintering away from the States through isolationism would be China, right? And so if we can kind of loop back to that before we get back to Trump, because we love talking about Trump on this show, is Carney recently signed a deal with China regarding some EVs, right? Electric vehicles. Yep. And so, when we talk about American isolationism in our new current timeline, they stand to benefit because, if you don't want to trade with America, you might turn and look at trade with China, which is what Canada has recently done. It's a smaller, sample, but it is something that's happening.
Right. I mean, it's a pretty limited deal. Yes, I think it's 49,000 EVs. Yeah. This, in part, was done so that the Chinese would lift tariffs on canola, which is a significant export, particularly for Saskatchewan. So on the face of it, while we could say Trump basically forced Canada in the hands of China, I think actually this was sort of a long-standing irritant between Canada and China. Of course, relations with China have been very bad over the last decade, basically during the Trudeau administration. Lots of tension, partly because we were trying to do right by the United States. For one, Canada kept under house arrest a very important tech CEO. Yes, and she was going to be extradited to the United States, and that was a request that the first Trump administration made of Canada. And we, of course, have extradition treaties with the United States. And so we did right by them, and we paid the price diplomatically and economically as China sort of punished us with things like tariffs, as well as imprisoning two of our citizens, the two Michaels, if you remember this terrible sort of event. So that's one thing. And then the other thing was the United States put a 100% tariff on EVs from China, and Canada, again, in unison with our largest trading partner, also put that tariff up. But we have been treated very poorly. We have not been congratulated or rewarded for our fealty with the Americans. And so we said, well, enough's enough. We are now going to no longer keep that tariff, at least at the level it once was. Again, this is a fairly limited number of EVs. I think the number I've heard is 3% of cars produced or sold in Canada, I think is the term, would be these EVs, which are apparently quite advanced as far as electric vehicles go. So, if you believe in the market, then this is another option for you as a car buyer. You can sort of decide for yourself whether these vehicles are something you want to purchase. And so I don't think it necessarily, that deal signals this major shift. But our prime minister is going to be in India, perhaps with an even bigger deal in mind. And so Canada has tried to diversify from the United States. And frankly, tried and failed since basically the 1970s, where we recognized that we relied far too much on that massive economy.
Yes.
And in the 1970s, we were not successful. And then, of course, we ended up getting the free trade agreement in the 1980s. And we basically hooked our wagon to that horse. And now we kind of are returning to this idea that we have to diversify. We can't rely on the United States because they're not a reliable partner.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is what the Prime Minister is doing. But again, will this be another failure like it was 50 years ago? We'll have to wait and see.
I mean, I hate waiting and seeing because
Okay.
I want the answers now.
All right.
Professor.
Well, it's going to be a success, Chris.
I mean, we hope
I
so.
can guarantee you.
I mean, joking aside, you've heard a lot of different blowback on this topic in particular because it is kind of like you said, a smaller example, but maybe a shift towards something different. We talked about India coming up. Talk about maybe South Korea. I think they also signed a potential deal.
That's right.
And I think I was watching something on the BBC. I think it equated to like 78% of Canada's international trade is done with the States, which is massive, obviously.
Oh, yes.
And so, like, even if you call that back a little bit, it's still gargantuan in number. Like, it's massive.
Well, that's right. I mean, again, I might have actually used this quote some other time we've spoken, but that was Pierre Trudeau's line about the United States. Living next to you is like a mouse living next to an elephant. We feel every, grunt and shift.
Yeah.
I didn't think I got that exactly right. He was more eloquent than I am here, but the point is made. The United States is still and significantly so, the largest economy in the world. I think we've been waiting for China to eclipse the United States and become number one, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. So, I mean, in a way, just as economics go and our geography go, we will, of course, be trading with the United States, as frustrating as that can be.
Yeah.
It's a massive economy. It's a massive consumer of natural resources, which Canada, of course, has plenty of. So that relationship will continue. And even if Donald Trump says Canada doesn't have anything that we need, that's just simply untrue.
Right.
Things like potash for fertilizer is definitely something the United States needs that Canada has in abundance. So, that's just one of many things.
Right. So let's continue to kind of from going global, strike it down slowly. I'll always have it back in some capacity. We'll find some way to do it. But I mean, I want to talk a bit about, at the Canadian level, we talked about it before. We've alluded to it months ago at this point. I think we had circled on January is leadership review.
Right.
And Carney's rival, if you were to call it that, is up for approval or disapproval. And so we're talking about Pierre Poilievre here because, if we didn't have Mark Carney, we would probably have Pierre Poilievre. Of course, if it wasn't for a wave of different other events. This past weekend.
Yeah.
I think this past was the end of January, I guess, at this point.
Yeah. It's Friday,
you got approved.
Oh, yes. No, there was a leadership
overwhelmingly
review.
approved.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No. So, that's what I was looking for, basically, that number. So, it was 87.4 something along those lines. A pretty significantly high number. For a sitting leader of a party, that's a good number. And so it does cement the fact that the party is behind him, and obviously then he can come into the House of Commons, knowing, his caucus is going to support him, and the membership of the Conservative Party will really overwhelmingly support him. If he got, even in the not 1970s, now I'm back to the 1970s, in the 70 percentiles,
Yes.
Which again, that's a B, right? Not so terrible, but that's not so great, actually, historically, for a sitting leader. And so the fact that he was easily beat that number in the 70s as a sitting leader means that he will likely, stay on for quite a bit longer. We'll see how it goes. I personally don't think there's going to be an election for quite a long time.
2029, you think?
Well, I'm not sure about that. It is still a minority government for the time being.
2 seats away.
Two seats away. But, it'll probably be back to 1 seat after a by-election in Toronto, but we'll see. So, it's about him in the opposition ranks trying to stop any one of his members from crossing the floor and giving the Liberals a majority. And that, I think, is much more the plan for the Liberals than going back to the polls, even if Mark Carney is actually polling pretty high. The Liberals are not in a don't have a huge lead over the Conservatives. And so, I don't think Canadians want to go back to the polls right now. And I don't think the Liberals are going to call an election.
I don't think so either. I circled all my notes here, which no one gets to see. It's all down on the table. I wanted to ask you if you were surprised, because, for all points and metrics, we kind of gave him a grade last time. Aside from larger voter turnout, or for I guess like voter numbers for him and like performance for seats, he failed in almost every other way. He didn't get his own riding. He didn't. He blew like a 20-some point lead, and then he had to kind of go to Alberta, win a by-election that felt like a layup, which we kind of also predicted.
Yep. I think you predicted that, but very good.
Points taken. I will happily take that point.
Yeah.
It felt odd because, when we talk about Carney in the political sphere, you've often described him as more of a centrist type.
Carney. Yeah. Well, even center-right, I would say.
Yeah, and I would argue that he's taken maybe some of that chunk from the, more recently traditional conservatives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm sure he's going to probably hold a bit of that as he kind of plays upon the economist card.
Yep.
I was kind of shocked that he had that much. And then I was like looking at him like, okay, well, maybe, Professor, maybe you could tell me if I'm being conspiratorial here. Don't worry, that's a loaded way to enter into this. I was like, okay, let's take a look at the factors at play here. Okay.
All right.
So let's look at where it happened. Alberta. Okay.
Sure.
I guess that kind of makes sense. Danielle Smith was there. Maybe like the travel wasn't that much of a burden. Okay, fine. I looked at the entry into the event, like $1,000 per entry.
Yeah.
I guess there's a price to that. It doesn't seem super high, but high enough. But I was wondering if maybe the timing also had a play in this, because this past weekend, it was also, correct me if I'm wrong, the Ontario Progressive Conservative Convention.
Yes.
I think in Toronto.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
So maybe I'm just thinking like those who went were already going to be more the Pierre Poilievre conservative base, and those who are maybe like fence sitters or more of the progressive conservatives from once upon a time didn't go because it's somewhere else to be or couldn't make it. Is there any truth to this, or am I just being kind of
it is. To be in two places at once is impossible. So
hard.
I guess if you're, and I'm sure this is true. I actually don't have these numbers, but it makes sense that you would be a member of the Progressive Conservatives provincially. There is a good chance also then, of course, you'd be a member of the Federal Conservative Party.
Possibly.
And so you had to sort of make a decision. Personally, of course, while of course the Progressive Conservative event is still significant, as far as policy development goes, if you wanted to vote against Pierre Poilievre, if you felt that strongly about it as a member of the Federal Conservative Party, I think you would have gone to that convention instead and made your displeasure known.
Yeah.
I guess 13% of the voters did something along those lines. Whether they were also members of the Progressive Conservative Party, I do not know. I don't think actually that information is available. So, no, I don't think it's a conspiracy necessarily. But just sort of more broadly outside of that, it is true that the Ontario Progressive Conservatives under Doug Ford don't necessarily get along with Pierre Poilievre, and that despite a little bit of tension over this EV deal with the Chinese, Doug Ford and Mark Carney have actually gotten along quite well.
Yeah.
And mind you, Danielle Smith and Mark Carney have gotten along fairly well, as have Scott Moe and Mark Carney. Yep. So he's done a pretty good job as far as dealing with the premiers go, and sort of that fealty to sort of the conservative cause that someone like Pierre Poilievre might demand of, his followers. The premiers might say, no, I got to do what's right for my province, right? And so if Mark Carney is going to get us some good deals, then, we'll congratulate him and play ball with him. That's the idea.
Fair. You know what, Professor? It's almost like we put this in a perfect segue opportunity, because we're going to carry that energy and pivot into more of a premier kind of conversation, and we'll get to Mr. Ford in particular in a minute. But Mark Carney recently had his first ministers meeting.
Yes.
like a day or two ago or something like that, which obviously looped in, and I saw all the memes. I saw the big table and the riffing with all the premiers. It was really interesting. As you mentioned, Danielle Smith she's been kind of more warm to Carney. I mean, it feels like Doug Ford, Premier Doug Ford. I always call him by the first name. I should probably not do that.
All right. I don't think he minds.
They'll never come on the show.
Yeah.
When we talked about the whole EV stuff, he didn't say he was mad. He said he was disappointed, almost like
he was upset.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
for sure.
It almost felt like he was kind of like a disapproved parent. It's like, I'm not mad at you. I'm just upset that this happened.
Well, look, I think it was. I don't know if this is used properly here, but it was a bit of a triangulation on Carney's part because he is looking to the West, and I think he does see some opportunity there for the federal Liberals.
Yeah.
They have not done well, of course, in Alberta and Saskatchewan for many years, many election cycles. And that feeling of resentment, of Western alienation, as it sometimes is called, that has fueled a separatist movement in Alberta. Some of that is, I think, on his mind, where he's diffusing that sense of resentment or grievance by helping out these canola farmers, which I think deserve our help. And if the trade-off is to hurt Doug Ford a little bit and the auto sector, which, of course, has had its own serious difficulties under these new tariffs, I think he sort of said that's a pretty good trade-off. Ford also has, and his government has, great ambitions for developing an electric vehicle and battery supply chain, getting rare earth minerals somehow out of the ground in the infamous Ring of Fire. We're slowly getting closer, slowly. And that whole supply chain of refining those metals and working on them, putting them in batteries, and then building cars around them, I think is a goal of the Progressive Conservatives of Ontario. And by bringing in these cheaper, perhaps very well-made Chinese electric vehicles, that undermines.
Poses a risk.
It poses a risk to those domestically made, the plan to make those domestically made vehicles. And that's still a very long time away, as far as I understand these things. And so, if the economics aren't there, then the investment won't be there, and that plan will get scuttled. So I think that's his sort of larger concern. The 49,000 vehicles in and of themselves dispersed across the country, I don't think is a major problem for the economics, but it's an indication of what might come, that the competition will push Ontario and that supply chain plan out of the market entirely. So we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. What I'm enjoying seeing, though, is what feels like in a time of crazy political unpredictability, is like how I'm not trying to play support here, but like how he's trying to play peacemaker. I'm talking about Mark Carney.
Yeah,
is that it feels kind of almost like refreshingly boring in a weird way, because we've had so much insane things happen at the international level in the last couple of years, especially to have a world leader, our nation's leader, our prime minister, kind of try to make peace and keep all members happy is kind of an oddly refreshing take. I don't know if that seems like a weird thing to say, but
no, I think
nice.
I think that's why he won the election.
Yeah.
I think that the partisanship of someone like Pierre Poilievre or Justin Trudeau before he resigned turned people off. It sort of did parallel American politics to some degree, which is rather dysfunctional. I think the government is shut down in part right now in the United States. I mean, we have a parliamentary system that couldn't happen here. Don't get me started. But that, I think, is absolutely true. And I think Canadians actually just historically want parties to work together and certainly provinces to work together.
Yeah.
And so if Carney is that kind of guy, a centrist, then, all of those sort of ideological concerns and partisan concerns are secondary to his job leading the country. And if he's making good decisions and has positive policies, then politicians of all stripes should support him. Of course, if the opposite is true, they won't. So, like, again, I'm not so naive to realize that as an election comes closer, suddenly people who were his supporters are his critics, but that's politics for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's been playing politics, right, from fire to ire. Like, let's talk a bit about the Alberta separatist movement,
Sure.
right, which we mentioned earlier. And now that Danielle Smith's kind of playing ball with the federal government. What's at risk here? Because we keep seeing it kind of drop a little bit. Is it any more serious than it was 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 3 years ago? Like, what's going on?
Well, I think the news. I mean, I believe this was happening earlier than it was reported, but it did actually get sort of a lot of attention. Was that some of the members of this separatist movement met with White House officials?
Yeah.
I think it was the Treasury Secretary Bessnet who said something about this at a meeting. Sort of like, criticizing Canada and sort of encouraging Alberta to separate, or Alberta becoming the 51st state, all by itself. I mean, that is terribly undiplomatic.
Yeah, it feels borderline traitorous.
Well, not traitorous from Bessnet. I mean, it's not very friendly, that's for sure. But it is. I think I can say treasonous of these separatists, and
Well put.
I think some individuals, as part of that movement, have legitimate gripes. Others, I think, have more nefarious goals in mind, which I think all Canadians should be concerned about. Making this a democratic process as far as the petitions and the signatures, funding, then a referendum. Where's that money coming from?
Yeah.
Is it coming from groups in the United States? I think that is very, very concerning. And, we worry about foreign influence. Usually we're worried about China or India or Russia trying to influence our elections. But here, it may be the United States and certain factions within the White House. So I think we have to very much keep our eye on that. And indeed, I know people in the government are certainly paying attention.
Yeah. Is there it sounds such like a naive question, but like, is there an easy way to kind of like figure out the motives of the money behind these kind of separatist groups in Alberta? Like,
no, I don't think so. I mean, obviously,
is it speculative?
No, I'm pretty sure we have some evidence along those lines.
Okay.
Whether it's illegal or not is a bit beyond my expertise. But as I put it, I think maybe it's traitorous. Actually, let's go back to traitorous.
Sure,
maybe treasonous is that's more of a legal term. Yes. So I find it very disturbing. But we know, certainly in some of the studies that I've looked at, when it came to the trucker convoy, there were funds coming in from the United States, keeping that going. And, whether that was done just out of a sense of, agreement with the cause, if it was anti-vaxxers, I'm not so sure. But again, I don't think that was a very innocent thing that was going on here. I think it was trying to stir the pot, and quite successful in that regard. So I think we should be concerned and keep our eyes on this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because when we talk about when I talk with like my family, my friends about like trying to stay on top of the news and what's happening in our country and our communities, it's always tough to kind of be able to like have a conversation of like, well, what are you reading? What are you consuming? Where are you getting your news? Where are you getting your facts? And I know it's really hard in 2026 and, in our current landscape. But like, yeah, I mean, some people might think it's like a grassroots kind of movement when realistically it might have some money coming from something that could be, going from grassroots to being something much different when you get some cash injected into it, which it feels like kind of maybe these two things are very much similar to.
Yep. That's right. Well, I mean, the line of late has been AstroTurf. So you make it look like grassroots.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's coming from somewhere else. It's artificial.
Well played.
And so that may be the case here. We'll see. I mean, I'm not quite sure when the petition actually has to be completed by. I don't have that date in my head right now, but I believe they need something like 180,000 signatures. My sense is that they probably will be able to get to that number.
Yeah.
And the mechanics of that referendum, how that's actually going to work, what kind of question people are going to be asked, remains all to be seen. That became quite controversial after the last referendum in Quebec. What was actually being asked? Was it a clear question? And then if, in fact, that referendum is successful, what happens next? All of this is a little hard to know because it's never really happened before. We've never had a successful separation referendum in Canada.
Right. It does feel almost kind of like you're spiting your face by cutting off your nose. Talk about the whole grass is greener thing. AstroTurf, I guess, might be greener depending on where you're looking at it. But is it real grass? I have no idea. But detailing the Prime Minister's meeting again, if we can.
Yeah, please.
Can you maybe get in some more details about the? Is it Kuzma? I always think of like Kuzco from Emperor's New Groove, but a CUSMA agreement regarding Canada, United States, and Mexico agreement regarding, I'm assuming, trade and how that might play into the provinces.
Right. So this is the old NAFTA. We now just call it Kuzma, and it's very confusing because I believe the Americans call it the U.S. Canada Mexico agreement.
Of course they do.
And then I think the Mexicans call it the Mexican U.S. Canada agreement. So
we're localizing acronyms here.
Yeah, it is a bit confusing, but it's North American Free Trade Agreement of old. This was renegotiated back in Trump's first term.
Yeah.
And as he put it at the time, this is the best deal ever. Now he doesn't necessarily agree with Trump. The first administration, he's almost in a debate with himself. He says he doesn't like the deal. I said, well, why did you sign it? Why did you say it was the best deal? So that has to be renegotiated. But that is part of these agreements. They're up for renegotiation, reconsideration. We can pull out of that deal. The Americans can pull out of that deal. The deal can be significantly changed. That seems to be where we're going. Others have spoken about bilateral deals. So instead of doing this trilateral deal, that includes Mexico, we would just have a straight-up U.S.-Canada agreement of some sort.
Okay.
That's a possibility as well. But Canada actually historically does very well when it comes to these kinds of negotiations.
Yeah.
Again, you might say, we're the mouse and they're the elephant. But surprisingly, Canada holds its own and is able to, get concessions and protect parts of our industry that we want to protect. And the deal that we have now has functioned fairly well and has actually shielded most of the Canadian economy from these tariffs on other parts. And so to have that deal completely torn up, I think, is concerning.
Yeah.
Because what happens the next day is really what I'd be keeping my eye on. Will all of these tariffs that other countries are under, at these very high levels, will that affect the Canadian economy, across the board? So we'll have to see. Yeah.
Based on your best predictions, we're putting you in a predictive sense here, Professor, what province or what industry in Canada best stands to benefit from a new agreement or from developments of the agreement currently?
Well, that's hard for me. I mean, I'm not an economist, so if you're asking me on this economic level, look, it's the auto sector, and in turn, it would be Ontario, I think, that has the most to gain by my sort of sense of these things. So this is not just hewers of wood and drawers of water, as we used to say about the Canadian economy, where we sort of dug the resources out of the ground and let other people, make secondary and tertiary, products out of them. Obviously, car manufacturing is very advanced. It requires a very, high technological supply chain, which in and of itself creates jobs. And it's so integrated with the United States. So if that was to be cut off, which in one way or the other, we've had an integrated car manufacturing system since the 1960s, If that suddenly is cut off because of these disagreements we've had with the Americans, yeah, I think Ontario has a lot to lose, and many very good, high-paying jobs, union jobs, will be lost. And the ones many have been lost even with these current tariffs, but it will only be worse if the free trade agreement itself is torn up. So I would say Ontario to answer your question.
Okay, so let's stay in Ontario.
Okay,
this is working out really well. Let's talk about Mr. Ford. Come back to Doug again. We talked about on our last show when we had on a friend of the show, Bill Steer, and we had former MP Jay Aspin to come in and talk a bit about their kind of rally against this clampdown, what we see on trustee democracy in Ontario in relation to the school boards, primarily near North, and obviously with Mr. Calandra. There were some hintings and stuff, I think, around the conversation that we had, not all of which was on the episode. But we talked a bit about how, and I mentioned you by name, by the way.
Oh, okay.
It was awesome. We referred to your previous episode where we talked about Doug's shift, right? Premier Doug Ford's shift into being populist to being more elitist, and they both tend to agree with this.
Right.
Because it feels like there's something maybe brewing here happening.
Yeah.
And, we were talking about how, the Minister of Education, Paul Calandra, removed 5 boards and now near North. And now at the time, I felt bad about this too, because I was like, Ben, we should almost edit the episode. That I think the day it came out, he took away, or he took under 2 more new school boards.
Right.
And I feel like there's more power plays happening in our own province as we look kind of more in our smaller field. Do you think there's any kind of play? I mean, you talked about this earlier about maybe Doug potentially looking at going into something more federal, as maybe setting up somewhere as more ministers to maybe kind of inherit the throne, so to speak.
I mean, yes, that kind of discussion has come up many times for Doug Ford. I mean, he's a very successful politician, one of the most successful premiers of Ontario in the province's history. So it does make sense. I'm hesitant to think that he will make that jump. He said he wants to run again for a 4th term as premier.
Please no.
Okay. Your feelings on the subject matter, I think, have become known.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't speak French is the big thing. And the gravitas that he has here in Ontario, he obviously has quite a bit of support from Ontarians. I'm not sure if that translates across the country, frankly, his brand of politics. I'm not so sure. Could he run as a conservative? Obviously, Pierre Poilievre has got something to say about that. He's just gotten the job again. So I don't know if there's space for him, frankly. And I think, I think he likes being premier. I think he likes being in that leadership position. And the fact that he, in some senses, is centralizing control, centralizing power, taking away, the grassroots of organizations like school boards and trustees, I think is, what happens when you're in office for so long. You slowly but surely try to consolidate everything you have. Inevitably, he will outlive his stay at Queen's Park. This happens to every politician. You think you can just run forever and get elected time and time again, but every dog has its day, and that day may be over. At some point during this term for Doug Ford. I'm not saying he has any competition at all from the NDP or the Liberals at the moment.
No, not currently.
But if they can get their act together, people start looking around and they're saying, hey, things aren't as good as I want them to be. Maybe there's alternative party and policies, and that shift may occur. So I'm not sure if he's going to make that jump to federal politics, is what I'm trying to say.
I feel like maybe that door is closed, even if it was temporarily, with Pierre's kind of approval, obviously.
Yeah.
By the time we recorded that last episode, it didn't happen yet. So there was a lot of like, ooh, what's in the winds? We didn't know. So I think this kind of maybe temporarily answers that question.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's talk a bit about Ontario. Like, how do you think Premier Ford's doing right now? I have to give him credit, even though I am not a fan of Doug Ford and his provincial conservatives, progressive conservatives. Excuse me. what he is good at, though, if he ever wanted to shift to federal, he's really good at appealing, or he used to be really good at appealing to the everyman or the every person,
Sure,
which I think he could have probably done maybe in places like Alberta where he had a secure support. But obviously that's kind of like a what if situation, which we can kick down the road until I don't know what year. But how do you think he's doing right now? Do you think he's kind of enjoying and relishing being kind of the middle person between Carney and federal conservatives? Like, do you think he's kind of doing what he really should be doing or wants to do?
Yeah, I mean, he does shoot from the hip a little bit. I think, probably was a bit, I'm mixing my metaphors, a bit over his skis when he released that ad during the Super Bowl, was it, last year? Was that the Super Bowl?
Was that Super Bowl? I think
it wasn't the Super Bowl. That's too long ago.
I think it was shorter than that. I think, was it maybe in relation to like a hockey event or something?
Maybe. I can't actually remember when those ads came out, but basically he used Ronald Reagan's speech.
It was when Carney was, it happened during Carney, so it was not last Super Bowl, but it was similar because
it was a big event. Anyhow,
yes, yeah.
I can't
Continue,
remember
please.
what it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a big event, a World Series, I think it was.
That's
actually.
what it was.
That was the
Yes,
World Series.
thank you.
Wrong
Thank
sport.
you.
That's it. Of
Yes,
course.
it was the
Of course.
Jays fighting
I realize. Yeah.
Dodgers.
So that I think was a bit of a mistake that kind of blew up in his face. He had to basically take the commercials off the air because Trump didn't like them. So I'm not quite sure what he was expecting from that. But that's a kind of a rare miscalculation, I think, on his part. For the most part, when he does stuff like that, it does work. If you think about it, I mean, he brought the entire province through all of those COVID years.
That's true.
And, he didn't sort of jump on that anti-vax populist bandwagon. He sort of
could have.
Because I think some conservative supporters certainly don't like the government telling them to wear masks or where they can go at any time. And I mean, of course, it rankles everybody. But he had a pretty steady hand on the tiller there. So he's congratulated for that. And then as far as the tariffs, of course, coming with Trump's second term, he's certainly been a very vocal advocate, not just for Ontario, but for Canada itself. And where are the deliverables is what I wonder. Like, has he really been successful helping Ontario out of these troubles, helping the auto sector out of these troubles? There's still job losses. There's still shifts being cut in auto plants.
Also high employment or unemployment right now in Ontario.
Yeah. So that's my point. Things may just become so overwhelming, and that it's hard. Then he can't blame Kathleen Wynne. He can't blame Dalton McGuinty anymore. He's been in office.
Can't blame Trudeau anymore.
Yeah, he's been in office for 8 years plus, and so it's on him. So if the economy flounders, if the unemployment rate increases, if inflation, of course, doesn't go down, especially at the grocery store, people look to blame somebody, and I think it would be Doug Ford. So even though I think his polling numbers right now are still very good, and it's, again, probably from a lack of competition, they can't stay that way. I mean, he will decline in the polls. Does that mean that he won't win another election? I'm not saying that, certainly. That's too far out at this point.
He could see a minority at some point.
Sure, maybe. Sure. Anything's possible. I mean, the Liberals don't even have a leader.
That's true.
So we
they
have
don't
to
have
wait.
much right now.
We have to wait and see.
So I meant to mention this on our notes earlier, and we can always work around this if it's maybe a different episode. But let's go further south for a little bit to our cross-border neighbors. Can we talk a bit about Minnesota happening right now?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot to unpack here, and I know it's not maybe super advertiser-friendly, but there's a lot happening in Minnesota in the city of Minneapolis regarding ICE, which are immigration enforcement people, I guess, and what they're doing and what's happening in regards to the civil unrest happening in Minnesota. I guess I got your first initial thoughts on this, and maybe what can we expect as Canadians who often view, obviously not just Americans, but Minnesotans is very similar to Canadian culture and Ontario and Manitoban culture. What's going on? What's happening right here, right now? And what can we decipher from the media?
Yeah. Well, I lived in Thunder Bay for a while, so I was back and forth to Minnesota quite often. And so, you're right. It was a little difficult to tell, other than the fact that the booze was so much cheaper. I think I recall. I was an undergraduate student at the time, so take it as you will.
Yeah.
I find it very disturbing. But at the same time, I think it's fair to say that's what Trump voters wanted. They wanted mass deportations. Trump was very clear on what he was going to do, and really, like, how does one go about that just on a practical or logistical level? You would have to do something along the lines of what we're seeing in Minnesota, but across the United States, where people are essentially being stopped on the street, asked to prove their citizenship, basically, thrown in jail and flown off and deported. Of course, including young children in some rare instances, but significant ones. And then on top of it, people exercising their First Amendment rights, as the Americans call it, and even their Second Amendment rights.
I was going to say, that doesn't even matter.
Right?
That either,
These rights, which the Americans hold dear, suddenly are compromised. And look, the thing I get frustrated by, even though I study politics, of course, for decades, is hypocrisy.
Yes.
And that is what I'm seeing among conservatives in the United States. They complained, whined endlessly about the contraction of First Amendment rights because they felt as though conservative voices were being shut out. Now they're doing exactly the same thing to
dissenting opinions,
but even talk show hosts, they're shutting them down, they're canceling them. It's right-wing wokeism is what I think rightly call it. And then perhaps most important thing that ties conservatives together is gun rights.
Second Amendment.
Yes, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. And again, I have some colleagues at the university that have strong opinions about what the Second Amendment actually means, but nonetheless, Americans have made decisions about that, and that is you can conceal carry in some states without a permit. In Minnesota, you do need a permit, and this is not good enough. Apparently now, they're being told, "Don't come to a protest armed, or you can expect violence."
It's insane to me.
Being rained down upon you, or being even killed, as was the case with this one individual, Alex Preddy. Obviously, was it Rachel Good? I can't remember. Renee Good. Renee Good was also, of course, killed, and all of this stuff, of course, was on film.
In multiple different angles, which is so apocalyptic.
It's very frightening, or dystopian at the very least.
Dystopian, very least,
yeah, that's right. And so, have the courage of your principles, I would say to those conservatives.
Literally stick to your guns here.
Literally stick to your guns. Thank you. Well, good line. And that's what bothers me. Again, if you're going to say, school shootings and, all of these accidental deaths are the price of freedom when it comes to gun rights, fine, that's at least consistent. I don't agree with that. It seems troubling.
Yeah.
But no, not even those people. Now they're like, no. If you don't meet some litmus test of the right kind of politics, you can't have a gun, and you cannot speak out, and you cannot protest, which, if I may say as a Canadian, sounds very un-American.
Yeah, I feel like we keep having to redefine and re-solidify what it means to be fascist in America. This most recent stuff, it feels like it's, at this point, it's no longer even subtle. It feels very clear and apparent that the rules that we made before doesn't matter. The beliefs that we held before don't matter. It's those who say it. It's the person who says it in particular. And they're obviously talking about the White House and the guy who sits there. That, for me, it feels like, okay, you don't really follow a party. You follow a person.
That's right. It's a cult of personality.
Yeah.
It's authoritarianism of a sort. And, a democracy only functions properly with things like the rule of law, a independent court system, able to interpret those laws as whether they're constitutional or not. But if the court system is stacked with cronies who will only, make rulings in support of their partisan views, then democracy teeters on the edge, and it is quite disturbing. We will have to see. I mean, I think the midterm elections, which are coming up in November, this is where senators and members of the House of Representatives...
They can flip the House,
if they can flip the House, potentially the Senate, then those guardrails will be a little hardier or stronger against what Trump is doing. But if, in fact, those elections don't have that kind of result, which is expected usually midway through a president's term, usually you go for the other party. I think we're in for a very rough ride for the next 2 years. I'm quite disturbed by what I'm seeing, as I'm sure most of your listeners and viewers are as well.
I mean, yeah, it's weird because I think all the footage of it is distressing. I think the word dystopia is a good way of putting it. I think it's the most appropriate way to put it in relation to this conversation. And I think it's really upsetting. Just the rules that we established that before in terms of like what people make decisions based are now kind of thrown out the window. It doesn't matter. What you do for a living doesn't matter. What beliefs you hold. If you're kind of in the way of the MAGA movement, it feels like you're going to maybe be stepped on, which is harrowing and distressing. Regarding to the midterms, I was curious before I get to my final topic, which is the by far away the heaviest topic. Okay. Don't worry. Do you think there's any kind of correlation between trending poll numbers leading up to the midterms and potentially the swing might happen with regarding the president's approval rating? Like in terms of like if he's trending downward right now, talking about Donald Trump. Yeah. Which I think from a couple metrics I saw that he's like down 20 points in terms of approval, or maybe even like negative. It might be something quite severe. Do you think that's going to actually impact the midterms and the elections regarding those who represent?
Oh, of course, yes. I mean, Trump is the Republican Party, and anger against him is a huge motivator for people to vote Democratic against his party, Trump's party, the Republican Party. So, in fact, I don't want to read too much into this because it's just one election, but there was a state Senate election in Texas where a ruby red, in other words, a Republican seat was flipped to a Democrat, turned blue, as the Americans like to say. And that has to have alarm bells going off for the Republicans that if they're going to lose in Texas, in this seat that I believe they've held for since the 1980s, I believe so. If they're losing that, that may mean something. Now, there might be something going on there that's local that maybe the national media missed. But nonetheless, you have seen a lot of those special elections go Democratic. Yeah, and it's all about enthusiasm. And so if you're a Trump voter, not necessarily sort of a vehement, MAGA person, but a Trump voter who voted for, let's say, affordability, obviously lower inflation, good jobs, law and order, all of those sorts of things that conservatives tend to be very supportive of, and you kind of look on the news, even Fox News, you might go, he ain't delivering. He's not delivering for me. And yeah, maybe I'm not going to go out and vote for a Democrat, but I'm just not going to vote at all. Yeah. And that won't be true on the other side. They will come out and vote in droves. And that, I think, we may be seeing, a red wave as, again, or a blue wave. I'm sorry. I get confused because it's flipped in Canada, of course, as far as the Liberals and the Conservatives go, as far as the colors go. But anyhow, it's like that's blue wave thing. We'll see. But we'll see. It's so far away. A million things will happen before those midterms occur. So what we're predicting now, maybe we shouldn't air it because
who knows? Honestly, exactly. I'm going to say something that might also not maybe age the best in 4 years, but it feels like this kind of political climate. I don't know. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but it feels like this would be like the end of a single issue voter. Because you look at the greater whole and be like, well, okay, I might not like how, and I'm using an example, I'm not expressing an opinion. how Biden or maybe even Kamala Harris approached what's happening in Gaza, and that's how you chose not to vote. Well, can you say that now when the alternative might be something completely different and completely, the other side?
Yeah, I mean, the Republicans have done a good job, creating sort of a sense of fear of what will happen if the Democrats get into office. That
they're great at that.
There'll be anarchy on the streets and all of these other things that that they've really used quite successfully in a number of elections. But again, looking on what's going on in Minneapolis, you're like saying, no, this is your doing. You have caused this by putting these masked agents on the street. It seems like that I think Trump or one of his appointees said we have to bring the temperature down. That remains to be seen if they can still engage in this mass deportation, which again is the promise he made to his voters. If he can do that without this kind of disruption and violence, I'm not sure if you can do those two things together.
Yeah, I don't know. So keeping in the hot seat, last time we had you on, I think it was around Christmas, and we're getting away from politics here, but this is a hot topic issue. I remember you were expressing excitement regarding the new season of Stranger Things, and I'm going to ask you about your thoughts on the final season. You don't have to give spoilers, but I know it was also, much like a lot of our topics today, a different variation of, but still very much contentious thoughts and opinions and feelings.
About Stranger Things? Didn't see that one coming. Well, look, I'm a child of the 80s, basically, so I really sort of, on an emotional level, loved that show, certainly in its first number of seasons. It's become a little less believable, as I think many of the actors are approaching their 30s, that they're high school students, so I find that a little difficult to buy. And look, I watched each one of those episodes. They were rather long.
The last one was super long.
And, I think they were trying to tie up a lot of loose ends just to do right by the viewers. I found much of it incredibly boring. I was just like,
I'm so sorry.
Get on with it, please. And, I was sitting there, and when it was over, I would say, well, I am glad that's the last season, because I think, again, what's the term? They jumped the shark.
Yeah.
It was one season too many.
Well, I'm keen because you were excited, and I know a lot of people in my life were also very excited. And then at the end of the season, I won't get into content in case you haven't watched it yet. I mean, if you care about the show and you're listening to this show, you haven't watched the end of the show, you should go and finish that, obviously. But a lot of people were speculating about a secret hidden episode. It felt like you kind of made your peace with it, but a lot of others didn't, which as a phenomenon I thought was fascinating, and maybe we'll bring in some sociology media experts from Nipissing to come in and talk about that.
Yeah, maybe that would be better.
But I was keen to hear your thoughts because you were so excited and then you were disappointed. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, bad. Fair point.
That's my Rotten Tomatoes review.
It brought comparisons to the end of Game of Thrones, but as we talk about a real Game of Thrones happening in our world, we'll end on this.
Yeah, thank you,
Professor. Thanks for coming in today, as always.
Hey, man, no problem at all. Thanks for the great questions and good conversation.
As always, we'll have you in next time, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much for listening or watching the Echo Essentials podcast. My name, as always, is Chris Pekarski. It's always nice having Dr. David Tabachnick in to talk about politics, especially Canadian politics. So let us know what you thought about the episode. Like the video, like the episode, subscribe, follow us on wherever you get your podcasts. If you can as well, make sure you check out the Echo Essentials newsletter, where you get all kinds of beats, topics, and episodes regarding the North Bay community and area. Thanks so much for listening.